Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to break down a huge concept in economics, supply. It's the engine that stocks our shelves and basically sets the price for everything, from your morning coffee to the phone in your pocket. So, let's jump right in.
Have you ever noticed this? One week your favorite latte costs one price, and the next, it's creeped up a bit? Or maybe a new coffee shop opens down the street and suddenly, discounts are everywhere. Well, the answer to all of this, it really comes down to understanding the decisions being made behind the counter.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we first need to get on the same page. We've got to define what economists actually mean when they talk about supply. And, it's a little more specific than you might think.
Okay, see those two words there, willing and able? They are absolutely key. Think about it. A coffee shop owner might be willing to sell 1 million cups of coffee a day, but if they only have one little espresso machine, they just aren't able. For something to count as part of the economic supply, you gotta have both.
All right, so we know what supply is. Now let's get into the simple core rule that basically governs how all producers behave. This idea is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
So it's this really direct relationship. Put yourself in the coffee shop owner's shoes for a second. If you found out you could suddenly sell a latte for $5 instead of just $2, you'd have a massive incentive to make more, right? Of course. You'd hire more baristas, you'd buy more beans, you'd try to serve as many people as you possibly could. And why? Because a higher price means more potential profit, and that is what fuels a higher supply.
This table right here, it's called a supply schedule, and it just makes things crystal clear. Look, at a measly $1 a cup, the shop is barely interested in making coffee at all, just 5 cups. But check out what happens when the price skyrockets to $5. Now they're motivated to pump out 65 cups. It's simple. More price, more coffee.
And here's the really cool part. When you take those numbers from the table and you just plot them on a graph, you get this upward sloping line. It's called a supply curve. And that upward slope tells the whole story at a glance. As the price climbs higher, the quantity the shop is willing to supply climbs right along with it.
Okay, you're going to want to pay close attention here because this next point is absolutely critical. This is where people tend to get a little tripped up. We need to understand the difference between a change that happens along the supply curve we already have and a change that moves the entire curve itself.
First up, a movement along the curve. This one's pretty simple. It's caused by only one thing, a change in the price of the good itself. So if the price of coffee goes from $3 up to $4, we just slide from one point on our existing supply curve to another. The shop's fundamental ability to make coffee hasn't changed, only the price has.
But a shift is a totally different story. In this case, the entire curve actually moves. This happens when some outside factor, something other than the coffee's current price, changes the producer's basic willingness or ability to sell. This is what we call a real change in supply.
So let's just lock this in. A movement is a change in quantity supplied, and it's all about price. A shift is a change in supply itself, and it's caused by some other background factor. Seriously, getting this distinction right is the key to understanding how markets actually work.
So that begs the question, right? If it's not the price, what are these mysterious non-price factors that can shift the entire supply curve? Well, let's break down the most important ones.
Here they are, the usual suspects. A change in any one of these can make a producer more or less willing to supply their product at every single price. For example, if the cost of coffee beans, that's an input cost, suddenly skyrockets, our coffee shop is going to supply less coffee at all prices.
Let's use a specific example just to see this thing in action. Imagine a brilliant inventor creates a new coffee roasting machine. It uses half the energy and works twice as fast. That's a huge improvement in technology.
So what's the result? Well, the cost of making coffee just plummeted. It's suddenly way more profitable to make coffee at any price. And that causes the entire supply curve to shift to the right, which means an increase in supply. Before, at $3, maybe they offered 45 cups. But now, with this new tech, they can easily offer 60.
Okay, so we know that when the price changes, the quantity supply changes. But the next big question is, by how much? Are suppliers super sensitive to price changes, or do they kind of barely react? This brings us to a really cool concept called elasticity.
The easiest way to think about elasticity is to just ask, how stretchy or responsive is a supply? It's like if you pull on a rubber band, it stretches a lot. But if you pull on a steel rod, it barely moves. Supply for different things works the exact same way.
And here's the more formal definition. It's simply a way to measure that responsiveness. It tells us the percentage change in the quantity supplied that you get from a 1% change in the price. This comparison here makes it really obvious. Supply is elastic for something like a t-shirt. If prices for t-shirts go up, a factory can pretty easily hire more workers, buy more fabric, and just ramp up production almost overnight. But supply is inelastic for things like, say, cruise ships or beachfront property. Even if the price of a beachfront lot doubles tomorrow, you can't just make more beachfront property. Production is slow and sometimes impossible to change.
So far, we've spent all our time exploring the world of the seller. But sellers don't just set prices in a vacuum. To find out where that price tag on your coffee actually comes from, we have to bring the other side of the market into the picture.
That's right, supply is only half the story. The final market price, the one you actually pay, is born at the exact intersection of supply, which is what sellers plan to sell, and demand, which is what buyers plan to buy. It's that magic point where both sides of the deal are happy.
And this table shows that whole process playing out, almost like a negotiation. Just look at the top. When the price is $5, sellers are thrilled. They want to supply 31 cups, but buyers only want 6. That's a huge surplus, which is going to force the shop to lower its price. Now flip to the bottom. At $2, buyers are demanding 25 cups, but sellers are only willing to offer 12. That's a shortage, and it's going to naturally push the price back up.
And all that pushing and pulling leads us right here. $3. That is the magic number. It's the equilibrium, the market clearing price. At this exact price, the number of cups buyers want to buy, 19, is exactly equal to the number of cups sellers want to sell. The market is perfectly in balance. No surplus, no shortage.
So, the next time you see gas prices jump around, or you wonder why strawberries are so cheap in the summer but expensive in the winter, you'll know what's really going on behind the scenes. You're seeing the law of supply, all those shifters, and that constant search for balance playing out all around you. So the real question is, now that you can see these hidden forces, which prices are you going to start looking at differently? Thanks for tuning in.